It's a subject I hadn't talked about in a long time, but it's one of those things that if you take it away from people, people will fight you, and that is meat. Okay, and I always tell folks, never let the dog something out without giving you a solution for it. Okay, and way back when, the solution was if you get the meat, you get you some food grade hydrogen peroxide uh, and get some 3%, and you soak your meat once it's thawed out. You soak your meat for a half hour in the refrigerator. You may have to put a weight on it or something to keep it submerged um, and below the water. But after that time period, the water gonna look like the dirtiest dishpan water you ever seen. But when you take it out of that water, rinse it off, and cook it, it just tastes so much better because that food grade hydrogen peroxide and pulled a lot of the poisons and the chemicals and drugs that they use in animals, pull it out of the meat. And that's what you see when you see that filthy water and things. I hate to put it down the drain to mess up our water system, but that's one of the steps. Okay. Well, lately, more and more farmers are using what we call the old methods of growing their grass. And the article that I was really want to talk about, I lost, okay, and and I tried and tried to find it real quickly, but I couldn't. But it was I will find it, okay. It just takes more time, and just couldn't do it before the show. But the farmer had just used old methods of growing his cattle, and it was grass fed. And now I understand they got new laws out to say that your meat has to stay where it came from, other than just the U.S. It has to say, I think, what farm it came from. So you get to know if it was grass fed or not. And that's what you want to look for if you're going to eat the meat, is a grass-fed cow, all right? And one of the things this guy, Will Harris, who's a farmer, one of the things he said that stuck out, and I wanted to play it for you, come out of his mouth, but he said that grain-fed cows is like eating he says, eating meat of an animal in this diet is of the same, eating meat of a cow, that his diet is the same disease. Well, that's not clear neither. But what he was basically saying, with my own words, is that eating meat from cows that are grain-fed, those cows' life expectancy is extremely short. And so that cow is dying, and you're eating meat from a dying cow, and most you put yourself in a situation, if your lifestyle is sedentary, just sitting down, not getting the exercises, that was killing a lot of people, is because they are eating cows that are grain-fed, and those grain-fed cows are loaded with diseases, and they loaded with drugs, and they loaded with chemicals, and they put put a lot of drugs in these cows because of the conditions that they're living is this in an environment where it's easy to get a lot of diseases. So they give them antibiotics to the point so they won't get diseases, but people end up eating those cows with all those antibiotics in it, and then your body is now consuming antibiotics on a regular basis, that if something that happened, disease happened to you, and you go get an antibiotic, it's not effective because your body has always got antibiotics in it. And then the diseases that you're trying to fight from the antibiotics builds up a resistance to the antibiotics. So you got to get a stronger antibiotic. And versus a grass-fed cow, if you leave it alone, lifespan is 24 years. Whereas these grain-fed cows, their lifespan is a whole lot shorter. He's talking, it's like he inferred to a few years. And like I said, if you're going to eat the meat, either take it and soak it in a 3% food-grade hydroperoxide, and or get you a meat that's labeled grass-fed meats. Okay. And consumers, here we go back here. This is going to be a little rough, y'all, but bear with me, all right? Because just one story I wanted to let you know about is that Consumers Report sent a letter to the USDA on drug residue in meats and poultry. And this is August 29, 2018. In a late-breaking news release, Consumer Reports has published an open letter to USDA with concerns about U.S. Department of Agriculture practices regarding the use of unapproved drugs in meat and poultry production. As reported by Consumers Union, Consumer Report found that even though residues of unapproved drugs are appearing in numerous examples of meat, the USDA has taken no action. In a letter to the USDA, Consumers Report said the residue program not only is ineffective, but the USDA has failed to even inform the regulatory and enforcement agents for drug residents, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, of this problem. Okay. Ms. Carla, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. I had put it on your airway probably a year or two or three ago about cure for cancer. And in that documentary, they were explaining how they were abusing and shooting up these animals and actually feeding the animals dead, sick animals to speed up their production to feed it to the population. And the doctors were all white in this documentary that was telling us that we are supposed to eat a plant-based diet. We were never supposed to eat the meat. And because of all this austerities that the animals go through before they get slaughtered, where those chemicals are in those animals before they die, all the frightening, the hardship, the fear, the anger, it's in these animals before they even die, on top of all the other chemicals and dead components that they're putting in these animals' bodies. So you are what you eat. When you walk around here and wonder why you're fearful or you're angry or you have this mental what they call it, the Alzheimer's. It's all because you are what you eat. But my next question for you is, since they're poisoning our soil where vegetables are growing, should we be using that peroxide to clean our vegetables? Because I got a 35% bottle of it in my refrigerator of that food hydrant peroxide.
In answer to your question, that's what we do at our household. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we take a 3% solution and rinse our vegetables off with it.
Okay. Thanks. And we're going to have to get our own land and our own seeds because they patent the seeds too.
Yes, ma'am, they are.
So I'm just glad that you constantly keep educating us, and those who have information, please share, because there is a solution to the pollution. We just got to do the execution. Thank you.
Okay. That's funny. All right, thank you. Yeah, she's right on point, I think, with her comments, and it's making people aware because, it seems like we get more and more people coming in with breathing challenges, asthma, bronchial. It just, it's like the list goes on and on. It could be prevented, I believe. I say I'm heavy into prevention. The things I talk about as far as, they cured sugar diabetes in animals since '57. Well, those formula I take myself, okay, because I'm not waiting to get sugar diabetes since I'm human and exposed to all this attack that they have on people when they're poison in the air, the water, the food, the poisons in the clothes, the electromagnetic fields from cell towers and cell phones, etc. It's easy to prevent a disease than get it and trying to get rid of it. So the formulas they have for cancer, I take that. One they have for high blood pressure, I take that. It's just providing more and more nourishment for the body. And but just let you know, the Consumers Report, it seemed like to be one of the good guys, trying to let the public know that the USDA is not doing its job, and they're not even informing the FDA so they can do their job, which is to protect us, okay? And as the article continue on from Dr. McCullough, as I've said before, the majority of drugs in the supermarket meats and poultry are antibiotics used by concentrated animal feeding operations, the CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operations, as a means of disease protections, quote, as well as to help the animals gain weight more quickly. Besides adding to the growing antibiotic resistance diseases that we have, the use of these drugs is obviously posing another threat and another risk to you, the consumer. And the animals are taking these drugs, you are too. This is not a small problem. It is major. If for no other reason than the U.S., according to the CDC, Center for Disease Control data, every year at least 2 million Americans acquire drug resistance infections, and 23,000 die as a result of the drug resistance infections. Now, I've heard that there's so much pesticide and preservatives in the food that when people die, the mortician don't have to preserve the body because the body is already preserved. Many more others die from conditions that were complicated by antibiotic resistance infections. less than 15 years from now, in the year 2030, antibiotic-resistant diseases, if left to spiral out of control, is expected to have killed 100 million people. That's a third of the country. So it's not a small problem. Not only that, 83% of the supermarket meats are contaminated with fecal matter. 83%. Chickens is particularly prone to contamination with not just drug-resistant bacteria, but with dangerous pathogens that are linked to lethal food poisons. Pathogens, the parasites, the fungus, the bacteria, the viruses, the molds, the yeast, those are pathogens. And the chickens are dangerously linked to lethal food poisonings. I know this is hard for some folks because black folks love us some chicken. And I'm not saying don't eat the chicken. If you do, get you some chicken, make sure it's grass-fed. Or take it and soak it in the 3% food-grade iron peroxide. Whew. In truth, the FDA needs to enforce the limitations of using these drugs in the agricultural setting, but it's deplicable that USDA is simply ignoring the problem and not even bothering to let the FDA know it's happening. So the FDA, were it so inclined, could do its job. Only time will tell whether this latest revelation will bring about any major changes quickly, but there's something you can do now. Even if the U.S. government chooses to stay silent on the issues of antibiotics overuse in agriculture, that doesn't mean you have to go along with it. Increasingly, consumers are demanding sustainable sources, antibiotic-free meats, and other animal products by choosing foods from farmers doing it the right way. You can help probe real change nationwide. I encourage you to either buy directly from a trusted farm or look for the American Grass-Fed Association logo, a much-needed grass-fed standard and certification for American-grown grass-fed meats and dairy. The standard allows for greater transparency and conformity and is intended to ensure the humane treatment of animals and meet consumers' expectations about grass-fed meats, including beef and pork and dairy, while being feasible for small farmers to achieve. As antibiotic resistance continues to worsen and the CAFO representing ground zero for the overuse, avoiding CAFO animal products is perhaps now more important than ever. So to just go back to what that what they call the CAFO, that stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. I some time ago had seen what they do to chickens. I couldn't believe it. And he had gave me this report, but it's just the chickens, the way they live in, it's just horrible. They have like the size of an 8.5 sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. That's the space they have to live in. Okay, and it affects their health. A chicken to go from an egg to a chicken, full-grown chicken, is usually takes 14 weeks. With the growth hormones they get in chickens, they're doing it in 4 weeks. When the chicken's eggs and they hatch them, let them grow. If it's a male chicken, they kill it right away because it doesn't produce eggs. And it's it's horrible. But anyway, this other article, which I haven't gone over, but I like the title, Why U.S. Meats Are Horrendous, the vulgar truth about what you eat with that steak or burger. Again, this is Macola's website. In 2008, Mexico refused the shipment of U.S. beef. The meat exceeded Mexico's regulations' upper limits of copper. The meat was returned to the United States, where it was sold and eaten. Contamination of meat by heavy metals, vegetarian drugs, pesticides is a problem which the U.S. government has for the most part ignored. And while bacteria contamination can be killed by cooking, chemical residues stay in the meat. Maybe I got that folks talking about, well, I can just cook it and kill it. Yeah, you can kill some of that stuff, but them chemicals, they stay there. The lead, the mercury, the copper, and all those things at the heavy dose that they have. And see, the prostate gland, for some reason, likes to absorb these heavy metals, okay? And you need, what Wayne had told us, is the L-histidine. It's an amino acid that helps breaks up those heavy metals in the prostate gland, okay? So it can be discarded out of the body. If you look at a colon chart, about maybe 3 or 4 inches inside the colon chart, right past the anus, is related to the prostate and to the uterus. It's one of the easiest areas to clean during an enema or colonic, okay? And based on, I think it was Dr. Walker, say if you clean these areas, then the problems, the challenges they have with the prostate and the uterus go away. So that's one reason we get into the oxy powder, because that help pulls poisons out of your colon if you're not inclined to do the enemas or colonics yourself, okay? But it's an easy area to get to as far as cleaning. Yes, Carla, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to add that it's being said that canola oil that you cook with causes a whole lot of toxins, chemicals as well. And the now they're saying that the oatmeal is cancerous. We got to remember that the climate change is causing the mosquitoes to be more dangerous with spreading more diseases. So we got a lot on our plate. So I do thank you for calling with the execution to the solution. I will hang up, and would you spell that oxy thing so I can come get it?
All right, will do. Yes, I thank God that people have crossed our path, that has given us solutions to the challenge, the attack they have on us. It's called oxy powder, OXY POWDER, pills. Okay, we go through quite a bit of it. Matter of fact, it's not, both pills battle for number one spot. These are two most popular products, one being the oxy powder, the second one being the, of course, the sex pill, confidence. Um, uh, so got to make a note to order some more oxy powder. It went up about $15 on me in shipping, but anyway, we consumed that. The other thing I want to point out about those metals, because you get a lot of the metals from the air, from those what you call chemtrails, so it polluting the air. But this company, the Aquaman Boost, have come up with a solution to help neutralize radiation in Japan's water some 16, 17 years ago. And we have it at HealthWise. I got to order some more of that too. But it's loaded with anywhere from 120 to 144 trace minerals. But you put it in your water, and from the reports they've seen, it neutralized the lead, mercury, copper, chlorine, fluoride, pesticides, herbicides that's in your body, and it's also in your water. And it's real easy, simple. You just put like about 5 drops in an 8-ounce cup of water, or juice, or beer, wine, whatever you're drinking. If you want to treat a whole gallon, you put like a teaspoon. Okay, this 1 ounce would treat 6 gallons. But if you use HealthWise water, because of the low surface tension, then it would would treat 12 gallons, because 1 teaspoon you can put in 2 gallons and it would treat it. And so it's just another armor to protect us against the onslaught of what they got going into our food, into our bodies. So that's, if you didn't get that, that's the L-histidine, okay, for the heavy metals that's in your contaminated foods, okay, and then the Aquaman Boost. And then the other one is the oxy powder. Now, AlterNet reports, quote, sick dairy cows are given medications to help them recover. But if it appears an animal will die, it is often sold to a slaughterhouse as quickly as possible to kill, as quickly as possible in time to kill it before it dies. Wow. So you are eating a dying cow. No wonder people are dying from eating their meat. People have been eating meat for centuries, but they're dying now at an alarming rate because of the drugs that's they putting into the meat, and they're giving you sick cows. You're probably all too familiar with the contaminations learned in the U.S. meat supply. That's hormones, antibiotics, pesticides are probably the most supermarket meats. It's particularly common knowledge. You might even know that 70% of all antibiotics used in the U.S. are for animals, primarily to serve as growth enhancers. What you may not know, however, is that a new report released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture has called into questioning the National Food Safety Inspection Service's ability to accurately monitor the safety of U.S. meats for potential toxic residue. Drug residue, heavy metals, common in U.S. meats. Residue of vegetarian residue of vegetarian drugs, pesticides, and heavy metals enter the food system when producers bring animals to slaughter that still have these toxins in their system. This occurs more often than you might think. For instance, in the dairy industry, if a farmer determines a sick cow is going to die, he will sell the animal as quickly as possible, even if it still has veterinarian drugs in his system. This ensures he will get some return on his investment at the expense of the American health, who ends up eating the contaminated meat, the medicated meat, the drugged meat. So-called waste milk, which is produced by medicated dairy cows and banned for human consumption, is also fed to veal calves, which then pass the medication on the consumers that eats them. Did y'all get that? This waste milk, which is produced by medicated dairy cows, are banned for human consumption. So it is fed to the calves, which then pass the medication on to consumers that eat them. Oh, Lord. I know what you're thinking. Surely there must be some type of regulatory agents in charge of monitoring for such blatant slip-ups as these. And there is. It goes by the name of the Food Safety and Inspection Services, a program of the USDA. Another federal agency failing to protect you. Wow. This came out in 2010, y'all, this article. I mean, it's, you think it's changed in 8 years? Unfortunately, the FSIS regulatory practices are woefully inadequate, according to USDA new reports. Quote, based on our reviews, we found that National Residue Program is not accomplishing its mission of monitoring the food supply for harmful residues. Together, the FSIS, FDA, EPA have not established thresholds for many dangerous substances, i.e. copper, dioxin number 3, which has resulted in meat with these substances being distributed in the marketplace, in commerce. Additionally, the FSIS does not attempt to recall meat, even when the tests have confirmed the excess presence of vegetarian drugs. For example, despite the FDA urging for FSIS to test meat for pesticides deemed high health risks, the agency only tests for one type of pesticide. 2. Many potentially harmful substances have no set tolerance threshold. This means that if the FSIS detects toxins in meat, it cannot ban it from the food supply unless it exists in quantities over the tolerance threshold. If there is no set threshold, the meat cannot be banned, no matter what. The report cites an example in 2008 when a shipment of U.S. meat was rejected by Mexico because of excess copper levels. The meat was instead distributed in the U.S. aid where American consumers unknowingly consumed it because the U.S. has no set tolerance for copper. You know, copper, you're only supposed to get 2 milligrams per day. In 2008, about 90% of residue violations occurred at dairy cows and veal plants. These producers had up to 211 violations that year, and many were repeated offenders. Although the FSIS has reviewed these plants multiple times, they did not perform an analysis that would have averted them to the numerous violations. So the plants were treated as though a residue problem was, quote, not reasonably likely to occur, unquote, which, when this was obviously not the case. Even when meat is found to be contaminated, FSIS does not recall it, the report says. Ooh. We also found that FSIS does not recall meat alternated with harmful residue, even when it is aware that the meat has failed its laboratory tests between July the 12th, 2007 and March 2011 and 2008. FDS found that 4 carcasses were alternated with violated levels of vegetarian drug 8 that the plant involved had released the meat into the food supply. Although the drugs involved would result in stomach, nerves, or skin problems for consumers, FSIS requested no recall. These examples are glaring reasons why eating mass-produced meat is like playing Russian roulette with your health. As the system stands, it is producing meat, it is producing food that is not fit for human consumption, and federal regulators are allowing it to happen. Wow. Remember, back to the solution, because this is depressing if you're a meat eater. But you notice, I'm just giving you some more meat to the reasons why you shouldn't eat meat. If you get the meat, soak it, it's thawed out, soak it for a half hour, and some 3% food grade hydrogen peroxide. I did it for my father's block club one time. I took 10 chickens and soaked it in a big old tub, and I made the tub all 3% food grade hydrogen peroxide and soaked it for a half hour at least. Ooh, I had to put the gloves on that I used to wash dishes to pull that meat out of that water, because it was just that horrific. Ooh, I remember to this day. And this is back in the 90s, okay. Boy. But the people, when they ate the meat, it tastes so good. I mean, of course, Pops could have the meat falling off the bone when he got through cooking it, but cooking does not kill all the germs, okay. The hydrogen peroxide pulls a lot of those poisons out of the meat, okay. Then you cook it, okay. It's best right now to get the grass-fed meats. That's what you want to look for, or get you some local farmers. They have them You have to look it up. Okay, I think we gave it a name of, but I know they have them at the Eastern Market, and I think it's a market over on 11 Mile, a farmer's market over on 11 Mile, just west of Main Street. Um, but you want to get, like I say, the grass-fed meats. Okay, back to the article from Dr. McCullough. Ooh-wee. Even more problems with the U.S. meat industry. The problems plaguing the meat industry are epidemic. Oh, yeah, somebody sent me a message about grass-fed chickens. So that's what you want to look for. They even have commercials about grass-fed chickens now. I mean, that's a good sign. Okay, if you eat chickens. The problems plaguing the meat industry are epidemic among the entire U.S. system, U.S. food system. When food is produced and distributed in such a mass scale, contaminations and poor quality become the norm. Ground beef, for instance, is typically an algorithm of meat from different cows, from different slaughterhouses. So one burger could have come from hundreds of animals in different parts of the world. Despite this, there is no federal regulations for meat grinders to test their ingredients for E. coli prior to selling them, and many retailers do not test either. In fact, American Food Service, which grinds 360 million pounds of hamburgers a year, had to stop, can't believe this, had to stop testing trimmings 10 years ago because slaughterhouse did not want to sell to them. One retailer that does test their trimmings for E. coli before grinding is Costco. And according to the New York Times, Tyson will not supply them because they don't want their products tested. It's Tyson. That's that company that I think they known for chickens. So just in case you missed that line, one retailer that does not test their trimmings for E. coli before grinding is Costco. Okay, just let me repeat that again. One retailer that does test their trimmings for E. coli before grinding is Costco. And according to U.S. Time, Tyson will not supply them because they don't want their products tested. Back in August of 2008, the USDA issued a guideline urging meat processors to test their ingredients before grinding, but the guideline is only optional and has been met with criticism from meat industry. As the New York Times reported, Dr. Kenneth Peterson, an assistant administrator with the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Services, said they could mandate testing, but they had to first consider its impact on the companies and not just you, the consumer. Dr. Peterson told the New York Times. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Whew. I don't know if I can get through this article, y'all. Dr. Peterson told the New York Times, quote, "I have to look at the entire industry, not just what is best for the public health," unquote. So that gives you an idea of how safe your meat supply truly is. It may look like a steak, it may smell like a steak, but the only way to really know what you're eating, if you got your meat at the supermarket, that is, it's sent it out for lab testing. For insiders, look at this flawed system. Read Michael Poulin's exposed from 2002. It remains one of the best overviews of what is wrong with the way beef is raised in the USA. If you're not a fan of feeling like your hamburger is part of a giant mad scientist experiment, listen up. There's a better way. Aha. Demand better foods and producers will listen. If you still buy your meat at your local supermarket, you should know that you are directly supporting this inhumane and filthy system. And you can bet that as long as there are people willing to buy cheap, toxic meat, the industry will continue to produce it. But if you start to demand more meat that is raised in a healthy, humane way, free from toxins and diseases, producers will have no choice but to listen. Already, this type of healthy, humane raised meat is out there, and you can find it by purchasing your meat directly from a trusted ranchers whose farm practices you're familiar with. Supporting local farmers and ranchers can go a long way towards improving the entire food system and, more importantly, your personal health and your family's health. I realize that not everyone has access to small farmers, but food from local sources increasingly in populations and is becoming easier to come by. There are a number of grass-fed beef farmers and ranchers in the U.S. that are safe, highly quality meats. For an excellent list of sustainable agriculture groups in your area, please see Promoting Sustainable Agriculture. This page is filled with sources for high quality produce and meats in your area. Promoting Sustainable Agriculture. Wow. Ooh. We got through that. And it's interesting. This is a book that came out, The Animal Connection. Trying to find out where it came out. In 1931, The Animal Connection, and it was reprinted in 1983. Diseases, Animals, and You. That's on the title. I doubt if it's out anymore. The Animal Connection, the link between cancer and other diseases from animals and food of animal origin. 1931. It was interesting studying that meat was so expensive, 100, 110 years ago, that only the rich could eat it because they can only afford it. Before then, folks was eating grains and beans and fresh fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds. Okay, meat rarely because it's so expensive. But the rich was getting sick, eating the meat. Somewhere along the line, they started making meat cheap. And then they started giving it to the people because it was cheap. They could buy it now. But they never told you what they did to make the meat cheap. And in 1931, this lady and this man put together this information about meat. And it's hard. Back then, I I'm, I didn't pick out any major page here, but to me, God has given us hint, hint, clues on what we should consume. Um, Part of the drugs they put in meat is an addictive drug to make you eat more meat, okay? Like they did cigarettes. They put the drugs in it to make you smoke more cigarettes. And so people become addictive to the cigarettes, addicted to drugs, heroin, crack cocaine, addicted to meat, addicted to sugar. That's what I'm saying. We're under attack. um, Dr. Makota got 30 tips to revolutionize your health. Your health is under siege from every direction. Environmental toxins, ultra-processed foods, EFAs, electronic magnetic fields from your cell phones, cell towers, wiring, government-subsidized GMOs. This lady it was a couple weeks ago now. I heard we had reports that they had pesticides in oatmeal because the GMO foods, genetically modified organisms, they put the pesticides and the herbicides, like the Roundup, into the ground, so it's in your food. You can't even rinse it off now. Okay, so I'm saying your health is under siege, and a host of other threats all around us. It is simply not possible to protect yourself unless you are armed with the cutting-edge health information. This is what we are doing our best to provide. The most complex task that can be made easy if you take one step at a time. Taken as a whole, this 30-tip plan makes it a comprehensive guide that can change your life. Just a few of the topics addressed are what to eat and when to eat it. Gregory put this chart out, and about our body goes through 3 different cycles every day. From noon to 8 p.m. is our peak cycle of digestion. That's the time we should eat our food. And our heaviest meal should be at noon, 1 or 2 o'clock, because that's the peak time of your energy level. And from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. is the peak time your body is using the food. Shouldn't eat after that time period. Give your body a chance to rest and use the food that we already have. Most Americans got 97 days of food stored into their body before they die of starvation. And the peak time of cleansing is from 4 in the morning to noon. In the morning, you break your fast with fruit. They call it breakfast, with 3 to 6 pieces of fruit. Because fruit is a natural cleanser, so eating fruit in the first thing in the morning aids your body in staying with the cycle. Okay, and what to eat and when to eat it. The other thing is, when you eat protein foods, your body secretes an acid substance to break the proteins down. When you eat starchy foods, the body secretes an alkaline substance to break the starchy foods down. If you eat both of those foods at the same time, both substances are secreted and they end up neutralizing each other, so very little gets broken down. And then they turn around and put these pesticides and herbicides and nitrates into the GMO foods that also stops the digestion of the food. And the food doesn't digest, it turns into fat and contributes to diseases. That's just one step out of the 30. It's so much. It's so much. But luckily, by God loving, He's given us solutions to what's going on, to the meats and to the air and to the water, the EMFOs and People come by HealthWise all the time. We put their phone on the plug and neutralize the EFAs from their phones. We do it for free. It takes 5 minutes. So this last 3 or 4 minutes, I just wanted to dedicate it to our sister, Aretha Franklin, who made a transition, but without putting her stamp on humanity. I mean, in a big, big way. When I first got the news 2 weeks ago, it just rocked my world. I couldn't understand why I was tearing up. I had to hold back the tears on the show. But I just love the sister. She, 50 years in the industry, using her wits without showing her kneecaps. I can't ever remember seeing any outfit that she wore above her knees. Okay, never seen her in bathing suits or no hot pants or any of that. Okay, it's just a lady of dignity, lady of soul, just the queen. Ultimate respect. That you can get those things without selling your body, but selling your wares and your talents and using your creativity that God has given you. And she was listening to radio and XM radio, and they got a channel for the past, I don't know, 2 weeks, it seemed like. They've been playing songs from Aretha. And do you know, Sister told me this last week, that James Brown and Aretha had a record, an album, a hit together. Can you imagine the sister who put out the record, Respect, and the brother who put out the record, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, putting together a song? I wish it had been more revolutionary, but just the ideal of those two giants working together. I mean, we have been fortunate to have such giants among us, and they set the pace. They let us know that it can be done using your wits, your God-given talents, to make a way out of no way. And my love go out to Aretha Franklin forever. Her soul is this, and she's so humble. It's so humble. Just chose to stay here in Detroit area, and it's just the onslaught of love and appreciation, respect for this sister is just pouring all over the world. In the next day or two, for the past 4 days, and it just for the past 2 weeks, and on, we're going to always love Aretha Franklin and always have respect for that sister. She has definitely set the bar, and we go for that bar, we too will get the respect that we are striving for. I love you, Aretha Franklin. I love you too, all those folks that are still here. And when you come by HealthWise, if you choose to, we do our best to try to get everybody a hug. At least 5 hugs a day. It's so important. It promotes healing, us coming together, supporting one another. So hopefully you will share the information that we share with you here today and make a difference in at least one somebody's life. Peace and love, y'all.
To be able to meet people from different countries enriches our lives.
Wayne County gave me so much, my degree, who I am.
The college supports you to grow They have the different campuses. I'm like, I can try this. Maklit Shonga, Ethiopia.
Sandra Gonzalez, México.
Arminalda Carrick, Bosnia.
Javed Khan, Bangladesh. Go to Wayne County. They will find your path and you will know what to do next.
You're watching WHPS, Highland Park, Detroit. Jazz and R&B on TV 33.